Hi folks, in the last video I explained to you that the success of the industrial city led to the generalization of exchange and the shift to a market society. And in this video I'd like to take a small digression to to talk about and use Karl Polanyi's ideas from The Great Transformation, a piece from an incredibly influential book from the early 40s when they're trying to think about what to do after World War II, in which he describes the political and economic origins of our time, which is precisely the emergence of a market society, by which he means a society dominated by a market economy, right? So society for him is primarily our fundamental social relations, how we organize our well-being, our social production, our economic production, and whatnot. So it's our social relations, and we can organize those and our reproduction on the basis of a number of different ways of organizing our economies. But what we see with the emergence of capitalism is the emergence of a society that's dominated by markets. And that is this notion of the generalization of exchange. So what Polanyi defines a market economy as an economic system controlled, regulated, and directed by markets alone, right? Order in the production and distribution of goods is entrusted to this self-regulating mechanism. That is the price mechanism of markets. Which is to say, a market economy is one in which prices alone decide, right? Other forms of economy, right, a redistributive economy, we can decide each household gets a certain amount of goods, etc., etc. But in a market economy, the prices alone decide. And so prices are the bedrock of all social relations. We relate to each other through the ways in which we earn money and spend money. And the important thing about this, with the emergence of capitalism and industrial capitalism in particular, is that in a market economy, if prices alone decide the allocation of resources and goods and services, then everything has to have a price, right? Everything has to be for sale, which means that there has to be a market for all elements of industry in particular, including land, labor, and money. But it's not clear that this that these three are amenable to market exchange, right? But let's talk about those first. We've got land, labor, and money, or labor, land, and money on our list here, and the markets, right? So we have labor has the price. The name of the price for labor is wages, right? We earn our wages, we earn our salary, and this is the price that you get for the use of labor power. And this serves as income for those who sell it. You and me, most of us anyway. Some of you might be investing and owning your own companies, in which case you are not earning wages, right? You're earning profits. The second market that has to have a market. Sorry, the second element that has to have a market is land. And the name of the price for that is rent, of course. Whether you're owning it or buying it, the value is calculated on the basis of rent, which is the price for the use of the land, and serves as an income for those who supply it, landowners or landowners. And finally, money itself, right, has to have a market. And the name of the price for getting money is interest, right? We pay interest in order to use money for a particular amount of time. And this serves as an income for those people who are able to provide money, those who have capital to lend out. However, the funny thing about this and my notes is that it's not clear that these three, land, labor, and capital, money, are really amenable to market relations, right? In a sense. Because markets are for the sale of commodities, right? And commodities refer to those objects that are produced for sale on the market, right? That is, I print a book in order to sell it in the market to make a profit. I've only got these things around me. I make a cell phone so that I can sell it in the market. These are all proper commodities, right? But it's not clear that labor, land, and money are commodities in the same way, right? Because they're not originally produced for sale on the market, right? Labor itself is a human activity that goes with life itself. Whether there's a market for labor or not, humans have to engage in some labor in order to transform, to metabolize the world around them in order to survive. We have to farm. We have to make something to barter or share or what have you, right? So labor pre-exists the market for labor. Land, of course, refers really to nature, which was not produced by us. It pre-exists humanity by millions and millions of years. And finally, money prior to capitalism was really just functioned as a token of purchasing power. They had set values that you used to exchange things. There wasn't very much of a borrowing of money for reproduction and in order to acquire interest and to make money from lending out money. So these three, land, labor, and money, pre-exist commodities and aren't initially objects produced for the sale of the market. But under capitalism, they have to be for sale. We have to be able to rent land. We have to be able to sell and buy labor. And we have to be able to sell and buy money. And so Polanyi introduces this incredibly well-known and critical concept of calling these three things fictitious commodities. That is, they're fake commodities. They're not really commodities. They pre-exist commodification. And therefore, their interests are not completely in line with that of the market economy, right? You and I, as humans, as laboring humans, have interests outside of our employment and outside of the sale of wages and the purchase of goods. Perhaps you like to write poetry or go for hikes or play music, right? These things are not necessarily done as as commodity production. They're done as part of human activity, right? So the fact that you have to sell your time makes it a kind of fictitious commodity. And the same goes for land and money. And, you know, of course, Polanyi wrote this in, I think, 1942 or something like this. We might also ask ourselves the question today of knowledge, right? Is knowledge itself a fictitious commodity? Because in some ways we might think that it is actually produced for sale on market, right? Samsung is doing its R&D precisely so it can sell that knowledge on the market. But on another level, it may very well be that knowledge is just something, and learning is just something that humans do, another form of human activity that enables us to survive better and live more enriching lives. So it may or may not be a fictitious commodity, but I think it's something worth reflecting on. And I encourage you to do so. Go get a beer or some soju with some people and see if you can figure that one out. So the second piece that we can draw from Polanyi and add to this sort of city history is another important one, and that is the inversion of relations between industry and commerce, between the mercantile city and the industrial city. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, which is our period of the mercantile city, right? The only effective market was for goods or commodities, right? And the way that industry itself took place, right? Originally, of course, right, mercantile trade was just, you know, people grew stuff in one place and wove sweaters somewhere else, and they exchanged those things. It was just it's just a arbitration exercise in different values of those goods in different places. But even as the merchants begin to organize their own production for sale, it comes to be that industrial style production is subservient to commerce. I use this is an element of, is in the set of commerce to denote this, right? So this means that industry was really just a part of commerce. It was subservient to the needs of commerce. And that worked early on through the putting out system. And so what the merchants would do, with very little capital risk to themselves, is that they would buy, for instance, buy some wool, buy a little spinning wheel, and bring it to the countryside and give it to, you know, some rural housewife, typically, who would spend her winter months and free time weaving that wool into thread, right? And then perhaps even knitting that into a sweater or something like this. So, so this just sort of distributed the resources out to where labor was, and then the merchant would come and collect that next time they passed through the area, and then carry those goods and sell them somewhere else. So the industry itself was subservient to commerce. Commerce is what determined the production that was done and the level of production that was done. I would just note that this putting out system is still with us today, right? It's subservient to, is a small component of larger industrial production today, but we still see the putting out system, particularly in the garment industry in developing countries. People will be given a stack of cloth to sew together or to cut into patterns or what have you, and when they're done, they bring it back to the factory and collect their money. So this putting out system has not gone away. However, we have seen an inversion, and industry has gone from an accessory of commerce to commerce being an accessory of industry. And that is because the great cost, complexity, and specificity of machinery for the factory system, as opposed to the putting out system, flips things around and concentrates production, right? So one of the key things that we can think about in general, and that perhaps we're seeing now under COVID-19 with telecommuting and people working from home, is that there are multiple ways to produce, right? We can put things out, we can do them in a factory, we can we can do them a number of different ways. And technological needs enable or create advantages for some systems versus another. And with the development of the technology that enabled the factory system, we get this inversion of relations between industry and commerce. And that, again, is because the factory system, because it needs land, it needs labor, it needs capital, leads to the concentration of industrial production in central cities, and mass production itself, right, becomes critical. And also changes the dynamics. Because under the putting out system, production efficiency was pretty low. There generally weren't enough goods produced to meet demand. But with the factory system, that reverses. Mass production becomes so efficient comparatively that it overproduces goods. And so we get too many hats, too many shirts, too many plates on the market at one time, and there is an insufficient demand in the market to consume all of the goods that are produced, right? And this, in the 1800s in particular, led to incredible economic crises like we have never seen. That factories would just, because there are no labor protections or anything, factories, as soon as they couldn't sell things, would just close down until they could sell out their existing stock. And then there were tons of people they could hire. So they would open up only after they'd sold their stock, which of course was a problem because all the workers who could buy that stock no longer had jobs. And so the crisis got deeper and went on even longer under this system. And so the existence of such a mass production of goods led to the need to find new markets, right? This is where commerce then becomes an accessory to industry. Commerce and the discovery and engagement with markets becomes a tool for enabling industrial production. And the clearest example of this is imperialism, in which these economic crises were causing enough political problems in the capitalist countries of Europe, that they realized that they needed to find new markets overseas, and this led to the more rapid imperialist takeover of the South, of of Africa, of Asia, of South America, and the further conversion of those places into budding markets for capitalist industrial centers to sell to. And very much of that leads, that need to sell goods to the poorer populations of the underdeveloped countries of the world actually led to the shift in those countries from simply direct colonial slave exploitation to wage exploitation, so that those people would have enough money to start to buy goods from Europe. And so we see the emergence of industry as the overwhelming power and its place in the industrial city. But the industrial city itself creates conditions, some of which I just mentioned, for its own undermining and displacement by the urban society, which I will discuss in the next video.